It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the last talk of the season. This afternoon, it's my pleasure to introduce Sydney Shen, a New York artist whose sculptures and installations or environments delve into obscure regions of medical history, literature of horror, and various internet subcultures to situate, in the words of Queens Museum curator Sophia Marissa Lucas, to situate our current crisis of truth in the era of AI-assisted echo chambers and fake news within a legacy of fact-seeking and meaning-making practices that, and now I'm paraphrasing, have through the course of history biased values and in so doing supported systems of oppression. Lots of solo shows and group shows. The notable solo shows include have been at Gallery Vacancy in Hong Kong and Shanghai, the Queens Museum here in New York, Sophia Trepleiner in Vienna, the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York, Hotel Art Pavilion in Brooklyn, Four Seasons in Zurich, Switzerland, Springsteen in Baltimore, Motel in Brooklyn. So you've got both hotel and motel. Yeah, that's good. Covering all the bases. Holy Motors, one of my favorite gallery names, Holy Motors in Hong Kong, Weekends in London, and a wonderful gallery that closed a couple of years ago, Interstate Projects in, I guess it was sort of in East Williamsburg / Bushwick. Group shows at G Museum in Nanjing, China, Simone Subal Gallery here in New York, Luboff Gallery, also in New York, Traupe Tuscany Zeidler in Berlin, Ziedler in Berlin, 47 Canal in New York, the Deutsches Hygiene Museum, the German Museum of Hygiene in Dresden, Sibling in Toronto, Aldea in Bergen, Norway, Invisible Exports here in New York, Pina in Vienna, Deitch Projects down in Soho, American Medium in New York, and Derek Eller Gallery in New York. Sydney received the 2019-2020 Jerome Foundation Queens Museum Emerging Artist Fellowship and was a Lower Manhattan Cultural Council Workspace Program resident. Her first public sculpture, oh wait, I am reading the wrong section, sorry about that. She received support from the Art Students League and New York Parks Department for a commissioned public project up on Riverside Park, I believe. Yep. The Queens Museum Jerome Foundation Fellowship for Emerging Artists, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's Workspace Residency Program, Nordisk Kunstcenter Dalsusen, mangling the pronunciation of that, sorry, Norway, in Dale, Norway, where she was an artist in residence, and the Queen's Council on the Arts. She received a bachelor's in fine arts from the Cooper Union. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sydney Shen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction and the valiant attempts at the Norwegian pronunciation. And yeah, thank you to Shinyu for having first reached out to me, and Isabel for facilitating, and everyone here to listen and see the presentation. So yeah, I'll just get started right away here. So I work mostly in sculpture and primarily in sculpture and occasionally in installation. And you know, I'm not really quite sure why I titled this presentation. This was a series of mud, slime, sludge, time, prism, pressure, shadow, etc. I believe this is sort of a found phrase I encountered when looking up elemental phenomena, and it just seemed sort of poetic to me, and sort of maybe to me felt like sort of this the way in which I approach this material, in that it all kind of feels, it's all up for game, it's all fair game. So as Mark had briefly already mentioned before, my sculptures and installations destabilize motifs of the macabre. I Frankenstein together handmade, fabricated, and found objects to examine contradictions such as fear and wonder, the sacred and profane, or even pain and pleasure. The body is evoked through its absence in much of my work, which can involve objects that threaten to alter both one's corporeal and spiritual forms. So, yeah, I'll start off the presentation with my most recent and current work. SBNO, also known as Standing But Not Operating, which is installed at Riverside Park South through next fall. And that's all the way on the west side at around 61st Street. It's if you want to see it, the best way to find it is in Google Maps, look up the locomotive lawn. And it's right around there. That's sort of the landmark at 61st Street. So this is my first public sculpture. I still feel a lot of like novelty around it. So like it's very exciting to me. So hopefully I don't spend all the time on this, but I'll go through sort of first the concept, then sort of the kinds of things one might encounter making a public sculpture as opposed to one for a gallery, and then also I'll go over a bit of the technical aspects of production. So this is SBNO, or Standing But Not Operating. SBNO describes defunct amusement park rides that remain in place yet are no longer operational. So theme parks sublimate the thrill of danger into a form of amusement, which appeals to what I find to be an innate human desire to be pushed beyond our limits. So this sculpture it evokes a few different, I guess, like familiar objects. So there's elements of a metronome, also a spinal column, and I used aged materials to suggest a form that is at once both a derelict ride, such as one that might be described as standing but not operating, but also something like an arcane artifact. Like this isn't something that didn't even become apparent to me immediately until it was installed, that like it really felt like some kind of like enigmatic monolith, or maybe even some kind of weird tomb. And so I kind of felt like it was like a monument to this primal urge to seek meaning by expanding boundaries of experience. And so why a metronome? I guess metronomes measure time through beats akin to the human heart, and beats per minute rapidly increase in response to arousal. And of course, the heart beats faster when it feels fear. And I guess, there's just something about this idea of the things that we do to get to the edge of experience, like the idea of like a theme park, a place where one like the fun part of a theme park is getting on a ride that makes you feel like you're going to die, is just absolutely fascinating to me. So here's just a picture from the first day of installation of the sculpture. So we installed it, I think, over a period of just 2 days. And so there are a lot of things that I encountered making a public sculpture that were completely new to me, in terms of just like the scale of the physical object itself, but then also the production. And in particular, I think like the things I had to think about, like, of course, the big one being like, well, how are people going to interact with it differently than if it were in the more conventional spaces one finds an artwork to be in. So some sort of funny things were like, well, we really have to make sure nobody's gonna climb on it. Because anything that even like people are, I guess people just want to climb on stuff. It's as primal of an urge as like wanting to feel like you're about to die on a roller coaster. So in the image you see that there's like a sort of what appears to be like a winding key mechanism that's like on the ground. That's like the back of the metronome sculpture. And so I had to initially, like, we had to think about positioning it so wasn't like a platform for someone to first step onto which they could then climb onto the rest of the sculpture. And the sculpture had gone through many different iterations digitally before kind of arriving at this. Like ironically, we actually had to scale it up twice its original size because initially so like the bottom, like, you know, the two parts of the sort of like base housing and then like the top part with the spine and like the little roof. The total height was originally going to be like 8 feet. But then we were like, oh, actually, then that means the bottom base part is only 4 feet tall. So someone could definitely just climb onto it easily. But if we make it just above, like out of reach of like the majority of people at 8 feet, then it'll be okay. So then with that bottom half being 8 feet, the total height of the entire sculpture became 16 feet. And I think that was really also conceptually an important thing to do because you know, so much of this sculpture was about sort of like evoking that kind of thrill that you get from a ride. And an 8-foot tall ride just doesn't really seem that scary. And I mean, neither does this in particular, but I think just standing under it, you kind of get a different kind of feeling, like looking up as opposed to looking straight at it. Yeah, so what other, I guess, yeah, there are also just like small sort of things that had to be like many small details that had to be changed in order to keep it unclimbable, like adding a sort of beveled edge to the edges of the base so that there weren't any handholds. And then of course, taking into consideration weather, like this piece actually, so you see in this slide that there's a large piece of plexiglass in the front window into the innards of the sculpture, like its guts, which are all like sort of these steel gears, and the rest of the spine continuing into the interior. And it actually got super fogged up inside the sculpture like the day after it was installed, to the point where you couldn't see into it. It was just almost like opaque white with condensation on the inside of it the first day it was installed. So we actually had to go back in and drill like tiny little holes around the perimeter of the plexiglass. And that's just something that, like, I mean, we had put in some like, I guess we had considered like moisture, but not to the extent that like yeah, it's just something that like with the public sculpture, there's just so many unexpected factors that you have to deal with. And if you're wondering why there are people inside of the sculpture, those are some of the installers who were actually doing this really crazy thing where they were welding the bottom part of the pendulum at that angle. So it was like really, and it had to be super precise so that it lined up with the top part of the pendulum on the external area so that to give the illusion that it was one single flush rod. So that was pretty impressive to witness. Also, another thing about the sculpture is that as far as like considerations for something being outside is that for me, ideally, it would not be the sort of like Cheeto dust orange. But it's made of Corten steel, which is a really versatile and like beautiful steel that's meant to take on this like wonderful, like deep, rich brown patina, but over time, it's like, you know, what like Richard Serra uses. And so like really the only thing I do is just wait for it to age, which I mean, it does. I guess I could have accelerated it a little bit, but like, yeah, it's just funny that that's part of the sculpture in a way. And so as far as like how this piece was made, so I'd say like it was over the period of like maybe like a little over 2 years, and for like almost like probably 70% of it was in like a digital form. And we were going through all these different iterations with various groups, like just between like me and the Art Students League, which had I'd done a public sculpture sort of program through them. So working with the other artists involved, in addition to them having to present to New York Parks Department. And then having to present to like the community board that the sculpture is in the district of, and then also presenting to engineers to make sure that it's not going to fall over. So that was a new thing to me, is just like all the sort of different ways in which you have to like look at your sculpture before it and think about it before and talk about it before it even actually exists. And once I got into making it, which was like, you know, in the last few months prior to being installed, this is a shots from my studio. I had, and these are, I made basically all of the individual vertebrae of the spine in my studio, or well, I had them laser cut, CNC cut, to these like flat pieces of steel to make this sort of like waffle interior structure. So it's kind of like a 3D puzzle basically that I then assembled and then welded the joints of in my studio. So then, and then all of that stuff was then brought to this fabricating company in rural Pennsylvania, where they were kind of working on like the really big stuff. So like the bass, the inner workings of the metronome. And then, and that was a really unique experience. That was facilitated by the Art Students League. They have, I guess, some sort of relationship with this company. Because usually I don't think this kind of stuff is allowed, because we were like working it, like there were me and a few other artists were working on our sculptures there. It was a very cool experience. We were working in there while the employees of this company were like working on their own things. So it's like kind of it's probably not OSHA approved, but it was really wonderful. And so here's just some pictures of finishing up some welding, stacking the vertebrae, and just going over some things with the with some of the employees who were helping out. And so I guess going back to going a little bit farther back, sorry, I'm just checking what time it is. Okay, cool. This by other, I guess, another fairly recent body of work is called First Chair, which I presented at Art Basel Hong Kong in 2023 with gallery vacancy. And so, so like SBNO, Standing But Not Operating, this work was spurred by my fascination with amusement parks, in particular thrill rides. Yeah, well, my past work, you know, occasionally highlights like morbid or abject paths to transcendence. Thrill rides are an all ages form of mass entertainment. And I think in particular, so SBNO was, you know, sort of more of like a carnival ride, like you know, a single chair on like a sort of teetering pendulum. But in particular, rides like roller coasters are engineered to induce in riders this physiological state of doom and possible death while simultaneously keeping them extremely safe. And so I think there's something going back to the like, you know, I keep saying, oh, I'm so fascinated by them. But I think maybe another way to word it is that like there's something like so like ludicrous, maybe like baroque and like excessive about it, in that like the engineering that goes into making, let's say like a roller coaster, finds a way to create something that's almost like art, in that it is like, it is meaningless, but as necessary as roads and bridges, because it speaks to, you know, this desire in the experience of the world as a human to like feel something. And yeah, like, so I'm not just an external observer of this sort of like, you know, cultural phenomenon. You know, I'm actually what people like to call a thuzy or a roller coaster enthusiast. So, and this is sort of like I'm kind of a noob in this world. But it's something that I like kind of got into with my husband, and we've rode about like over 70 roller coasters in the past couple years, which is actually like rookie numbers. But yeah, like I've gone to many theme parks in the US and other countries.
Anaconda in Vienna.
Sorry?
You ride the Anaconda in Vienna, the crazy one.
No, I didn't, I have not gone to, is that at Prater?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I don't even know who I'm talking to.
That was more.
Oh, hey, oh, cool, okay, yeah, no, I would love to return, just to ride the roller coaster, but yeah, and to see the beautiful city, but yeah, I'd like to go there one day, yeah. When I went to, when I did, Lista Art Fair in Basel a couple of years ago, I took like a 4-hour train ride to Cologne, Germany to go to Phantasialand, which is a premier theme park if you ever find yourself near Cologne, with like excellent theming, and they just opened up like the steampunk area of the park, with like a brand new roller coaster that was like really, really beautiful. Highly recommended. Even if you don't like rides, it's just it's an immersive experience. But anyway, I guess I should be talking about my work. So I guess I started talking about that because yeah, there's like a sort of roller coaster-esque piece in this show, and also this drop tower, which this is actually sort of almost like in hindsight, I realized like, oh, this was actually like the prototype for SBNO. Because like that's sort of like the public sculpture safe iteration of this piece, that, and also like after this piece had developed more, because I guess I kind of saw this piece as sort of being like a scale, like a speculative like scale model for like an impossible ride. And I guess what I was imagining is like this would be like a drop tower where like the chairs drop down or something. And so there are several framed photographs in this show too. And the photographs are all so they're all made, so these images are made from found photographs that, and they're meant to be sort of like ambiguous what they are, like the scale, like is this, like cartographical or maybe like geological, or is this like, like microscopic, like these are like tiny pores or the surface of the up close like surface of something. And so actually these pictures are of little tiny hair ties and scrunchies on the like fake mountains that surround the queue line of the Escape from Everest ride at Disneyland. And so this was something that so there's this thing that like when you're waiting in line for like a roller coaster or something, that like sometimes you'll see areas where there's just like a big accumulation of like hair ties that people have thrown over, the railing. And it's just like a thing that happens. And I think it's to me, I find it's like this sort of like beautiful sort of group gesture that, was or that happened organically with like no beginning or end, like no one like announced it. It's just like a sort of almost like maybe like a wishing well. It's just the type of thing that like there's a playfulness to this kind of like ritual that kind of developed out of nowhere. And like in the moment of doing that, maybe you think like, oh yeah, someone else was also here, like really bored, and like, but they can like sort of add their name to like this sort of symbol of like everyone being bored in line. And so yeah, that happens like in a lot of like lines for rides, but like the pictures of like this happening on Escape from Everest were particularly I don't know, interesting to me, because of course it looks like, it's not obvious what it is. Like this could actually be a mountain. And of course there's this idea of, trash accumulating eternally on Mount Everest that is sort of, I don't know, this like hyper contemporary sort of I guess idea or like thing that's just happening. And yeah, I guess with these pieces I made, maybe I think like 3 out of 6 of these, I made them into stereograms. So basically I would take two, like the same photo, but then just alter the, like skew the angle slightly on each one so that, and then reprint them so that when you, like, you know, cross your eyes, it creates this optical illusion of depth. And yeah, and I guess maybe later in my presentation, you'll see like I'm sort of interested in this sort of like how in like the sort of like the like antique or like early forms of photography and the ways in which photography was at the intersection of entertainment and science, and stereograms were something that were utilized in both like surgical setting, but also as like a, you know, just like a fun toy for kids. And so, yeah, so these are those pieces. And there are like little, so I made these frames, and there's like little raccoon penis bones hanging off of several of them, which is just, and I have a lot of raccoon penis bones for some reason. And so I use that, they're just sort of like fodder in some of my work, but in here in particular, I think it makes more, especially more sense maybe because it's sort of like, because they're like lucky talisman in some way, like maybe the way a rabbit's foot is, and sort of the type of thing that maybe you would sort of like a penny you throw into a wishing well, maybe like the type of thing that, I don't know, there's like a ritual or like this little, like a luck or something to it that felt like it resonated somehow with throwing hair ties over the railing, waiting in line for a roller coaster. So here is another body work. This is from 2022 called Cubio Dissolvi. I might actually be saying that wrong because it's Latin. And but this was also another presentation at an art fair. This is the one where I went to Phantasialand in Cologne from, but this was also with Gallery Vacancy in Shanghai. So this is a group of work where basically I made a bunch of sculptures, both on the like wall sculptures and then this freestanding sculpture of these forms that are based on the backs of earrings, like post earrings, like the sort of, and I guess I'm sort of interested in, I became really interested in them because I was like, oh, these are like really beautiful objects. But they're actually things that are meant to be hidden, and they're like so easily lost or forgotten. Like they're not even meant to be seen. So there's really nothing, like these objects are like not meant to be like aesthetic objects at all. They're like supposed to be purely utilitarian. And I think I've kind of always been interested in that sort of idea of like ornament and sort of being like like I really like ornamental things, but sometimes I feel guilty about liking them so much because it feels like, you know, you're decorating a surface. And so I guess maybe that's related to like, I guess the best way I can explain that is sort of like the way in which steampunk is such like a reviled sort of sensibility. And I think a big part of that might be this idea that you're taking, like, you know, one of the motifs of steampunk is like taking, is like mechanical, like a fetishization of like mechanical things. And mechanical things are like things that are meant to do something. And but when you take a gear and like you glue it onto like a top hat, it's like not doing anything anymore. So then it almost feels like perverse, like in terms of like a, I don't know, and which translates into it being like gross visually, maybe. So that's why I love steampunk stuff. But like, yeah, like going back to the idea of like ornament, you know, like earrings are ornaments for the body, and piercing itself is, you know, it's a very common normal type of body modification. But you know, it is something that, yeah, you do have to alter your body in a way with like a sharp stabbing tool. And yeah, and so I just wanted to make these works that where I think by enlarging the part of the earring that's kind of not really seen a lot and putting it on a wall, I kind of was thinking about maybe turning something that was very small and insignificant into something that might feel a bit threatening or like strange. So, so yeah, and then here's just another picture of it from a different angle of the booth. Those 5 black and white prints are from another artist, but I think this just shows that sculpture on the ground from, I guess both of these pictures show from the back, but the wall work is from another artist, but so this piece on the ground is made with the, what are they called? Like the foam, like foam taxidermy forms, like that's what you would stretch the hide of an animal over. And then I made this this wooden backing for it that I think it looks a few different things, but mainly like maybe like the card that you buy a set of earrings on. And then I put the earrings on the back of it to kind of, yeah, basically this is like, okay, this is what like a giant pair of earrings would look like if you were wearing like, I don't know, taxidermy deer earrings. But yeah, so like what that idea was, I don't know, yeah, I just really want to emphasize this sort of like making like this totally tiny, inconsequential, small, cute, dainty ornament into something like threatening and weird and kind of creepy. Yeah, and here are some close-ups of the individual earring backs. Oh yeah, so cupido dissolving, what does that mean? So it is an ecclesiastical Latin phrase, which it translates roughly to I wish to dissolve. And so that kind of, and it's something that is I think a phrase that's a refrain that is found in some like Christian mystical texts. And I'm not religious, by the way, but so maybe that's why I can look at this with a sense of like fascination or distance. But I think it's interesting because this expresses like this profane desire for divine transcendence through self-destruction. Like it almost seems like contrary in itself. And so yeah, I think by like putting that actual phrase on the work, it kind of highlights even more how these earring backs kind of now have this new like sinister, vaguely erotic, and maybe even like weapon-like form when they're enlarged. This one says violet gland on it. I guess you can't see it all, but that doesn't matter because yeah, the point is like not, and I guess I get asked this a lot sometimes. It's like, well, like your work has all this text on it, but like, how can the reader or the viewer access that and like what it means? And I guess to me, it's not so important that you know what it means, but it's maybe almost like, I like maybe something like an Easter egg in a way where it's like if you like, or maybe something that might encourage one to seek out more information if they are so inclined, but it would not, you would not be lacking anything if you didn't know what it meant, because ultimately I'm, drawn to these things through a total casual form of like research, if I could even call it that. It's like not academic, it's like through more of a sense of wonder and being like, oh, how does like just encountering stuff, because I like to look at stuff and so yeah, I'm hoping that by making this work, maybe that'll elicit a similar response in other people. And here's the other 2 earrings, which say like jet of blood on them, which I believe I think that's a Artaud play, perhaps. I'm a fan of him. So now I'm going to be showing some slides from like first solo show with Gallery Vacancy in Shanghai, and it's called Misery Whip. So Misery Whip is it's a common nickname for these sort of large 2-person saws that are used to cut down large trees. And so that's what's in this image right now, or basically my sculptural version of one. So in the show, there are 3 of these Misery Whip sculptures where I replace the teeth of the saw blades with words instead. And so in this piece, it says folly, madness, frenzy, fever. And those are some quote unquote symptoms from the medical tome Anatomy of Melancholy, which was like a treatise on depression from the 1600s by Robert Burton. And Again, it's like these phrases are just things that sort of resonate with me, but I'm not really sure why, but it just stood out when I was reading excerpts from this book. And here's another misery whip. And the text here, and again, totally just like arcane or like not even accessible, points toward a few things. My pet poodle, Momo, Artaud, who was also known to be called Le Momo, and also this elegant Gothic Lolita fashion label called Moi Même Moitié, which is like, I think, fake French, which makes me only like it more. And yeah, I guess another way to talk about like, okay, well, like why all this language if like you don't know what it means when you like first see it, like as a viewer. I guess one way to think about it is like as a sculptural material itself, to like along with like these sort of like combinations of other materials to be to evoke these sort of ambivalent, unnameable states. Like I guess I'm deconstructing it in a way, or like, you know, trying to like make it less, like I'm trying to like take it away from what it means in some ways. Or I guess maybe destabilize is like the art term I would use to say what I mean. So one broad theme of this show I was thinking around was the pastoral as a persistent romantic ideal. So there are a lot of baskets in this show, or actually just two, but so this piece is a self-portrait in a basket. It's called My Name is Lubert Das, after a folk dunce-like Dutch character, Lubert Das. And there's a Hieronymus Bosch painting called The Cure of Folly. You know, folly being a word that was in the misery whip sculpture. But in The Cure of Folly, the Bosch painting, Lubert Das is depicted as having a hole bored into a skull by a doctor, which is, you know, was just trepanation, like a sort of archaic medical treatment for various things. But the reason he was having it done was because it was believed that, like, you know, madness was like something that like a physical object, like a stone that you could extract from the body. And so I guess it's hard to see it in this photo, but in the cast of, in relief of my face, I believe I cast that in, I think that's made in aqua resin that I flocked with like nylon flocking, like that velvety powder. There's like, you'll see that it looks like there's like a hole in my head, or like the negative of a hole, like, so it's like a bump. So it's sort of like imagining what if I got, you know, like a hole drilled in my brain. And so I guess, like, so why did I put this in a basket? I guess I knew I want, like, for a time that I wanted to make a sculpture with like maybe about or around the idea of the basket that's at the foot of a guillotine. And also I love using baskets around my house, and I was looking for baskets to keep junk in my house around the time. So I guess then I've thought about how Marie Antoinette was sort of infamous for LARPing as a peasant girl at her fake farm in Versailles, which is called the Queen's Hamlet. So I guess in this work is where the pastoral and the macabre intersect, maybe with like the aspirational, like Joanna Gaines, diffusion line target style of the contemporary, which is like, you know, I love what is it, like shabby chic, homed decor. And there's a picture of the basket on a hay pedestal, which was a decision that was made during install, which I was very pleased with. So while I was looking for the right baskets for this work, I became really obsessed with mass-produced Longaberger baskets. So, which to me epitomized this tension between things like utility and craft, decoration, art and commodities, and like how, especially now, it's like very hard to like tease apart these things. They're also intertwined, or like a basket, they're interwoven. Longaberger was like this company, I think was quite popular in like the 80s and 90s. And there was like a Longaberger craze where maybe if anyone is familiar like with Beanie Babies, like these sort of mass-produced objects like became like very valuable commodities, even though like there were so many of them being made. But what's particular about Longaberger baskets is that like their popularity is all built on this idea that they're like handmade, they're like artisan made. I guess it can't really be because they're mass produced, but I think someone like signs each one or something, and they do make like editions of things. But they're also, they're like, very, I guess, like affordable in a sense that it's like they were also like a multi-level marketing company where like you would like the buyers of like consumers of Longaberger baskets would host parties where they would try to get their friends to buy Longaberger baskets, and then you could have, and then you could like move up within the company the more baskets you sold, and get all these like special perks. So I just found all that super fascinating. Like they so I ended up going to the Longaberger Basket former headquarters, which is in Dresden, Ohio. And this is a picture of my husband holding my hand in front of the building. And so what's really great, so this is an abandoned building. It's been abandoned, I think, for a few years now, because this company is not around it. So you can find a lot of the baskets are super cheap on eBay, which is what I was doing. And it's like, this is like the most amazing building. It looks obviously like a basket. It's like amazing to see in person. We visited it while on a bit of like a roller coaster, a theme park tour of the Midwest. Yeah, it was like a pilgrimage for me. And I don't know if this is like, this image is even as funny as I think it is, because I feel like this is like a meme style that like maybe was like, it's referencing that like photos of like the person holding like their girlfriend's hand. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, so that's Longaberger baskets. And here's another Longaberger basket that I got that I then made into, and I'm not even sure what it's meant to contain, like originally, like that's why I was like, oh my God, this is like a beautiful shape. So yeah, it was just like a black basket. And then I like made this sort of interior lining and for it, the green with the ribbons and the pleating. And then the interior is supposed to kind of, I guess it's supposed to look something like a surgical instrument case. And this was also sort of like it came from like wanting to make something for a while, but not knowing the right forms. Sort of like maybe when I was thinking about like, I want to make a piece about the head or like the basket at the foot of a guillotine. I was like, oh, well, I also wanted to make pieces that were sort of like containers for missing objects. And I was like, it actually makes a lot of sense to make a companion piece for the guillotine head portrait to be these tray panning tools. So yeah, these silhouettes in the basket are the like interpretations of like surgical instruments that would be used to open a skull or maybe even amputate some limbs. And yeah, so I guess I took the inspiration for the sort of look of it from baby coffins, and also like elegant Gothic Lolita frocks. Yeah. Um, and then so here is a smaller wall piece from that show. I believe I had like 2 or 3 of these. So this is made from a found object and some potatoes stuck on it. The object is a calf weaner. Wiener as in WEAN, not like a wiener like a hot dog, like to wean a calf off of its mother, to stop it from nursing. And what it is, it's like a spiked nose ring for the cow, so that if it gets close to the mother, it like pokes her, which is like, it seems so cruel. It's like I mean, and I'm sure it's like not actually so cruel, but like it's, it's one of those almost like sort of like maybe like objects that it looks like a torture instrument. And so I guess like, yeah, in this show, there's like, it shares the punitive qualities of other types of torture devices that are coming up in the next slides. And why did I put potatoes on it? So this is another like sort of like rabbit hole I went down at the time that somehow found its way into this work where I somehow like found myself on a YouTube video where a person was showing how you can remove the like a farmer was showing how you can remove the what's it called, like the spur from a rooster's foot by taking a hot steamed potato and sticking it on the spur, then like twisting it off. So it's kind of like a what's it called, like a pedicure for a rooster. And the spur is something that like you like, I guess from what I learned from reading animal husbandry forums, since I was like, that seems like kind of like that must be painful. It's like, no, that's like, it's probably a little annoying, but it's like not bad for the animal. If anything, it's done so that they don't, fight and hurt and maim each other. And it's like, getting your nails cut kind of. But yeah, so then I don't know. So I put the potatoes on there. So going back to this idea of like punitive objects, there are these other wall pieces that I call shame fiddles. And that's actually based on like an actual thing. So shame fiddles which are also known as Stoltz fiddles, where these like sort of, they're like mobile stocks where like, where a person would be, locked into it. Like, so like their head would go in the big hole and their arms would go in the little hole. And then you would be like put in one of these as a form of like public humiliation for some kind of like petty crime. And they were oftentimes called scold's fiddles, because oftentimes it's like the crime was something that like was kind of gendered, like, a woman gossiping too much or something. But yeah, so I don't know, I just thought they were like very interesting objects because like not only are they like these sort of like objects of torment, but they like someone was like, no, I don't just want to like make like a stock thing. Like I want to make it look like something else because like, yeah, because I guess it kind of vaguely holds your body in a position that might be kind of like one that it would be in if you were playing a violin or a fiddle. So like if you look at images of these, like, yeah, they look like the way they do in like the silhouette of this is pretty faithful to the like a one I found. But sort of my like reinterpretation of this was like I guess you could actually use this if you wanted to, but so for each of the fiddles, there are 3 of them. I sort of like hollowed out each one and made each one into made like a maze or sort of like a game inside of each one. Because I was thinking about like the way one would have to be moving around, and the wearer's physical movements or struggle to like control the game or like the maze. Um, like this one, like there are these marbles inside or like these ball bearings. And it kind of maybe looks like skee ball in a way too. And so yeah, and this one kind of looks like maybe like a pinball like layout with these pins sticking out in addition to other hardware used to evoke like the parts of a pinball machine. And yeah, I guess I was thinking about the ways in which these things are all also part of like carnivals and sort of like how carnivalesque is an aspect of the macabre and how that combined with this form was quite potent. Like for here, it even feels almost like an Iron Maiden, I guess. And yeah, oh yeah, and in this one, so I found on I think on Etsy, someone who's like selling what are they called? Like little beads made from fossilized dinosaur feces. Or no, sorry, no, they're made from dinosaurs' gizzard stones, but people also sell fossilized dinosaur feces. So they're actually made from the stones that, are inside, the animal's stomach to help them with digestion, after the teeth, it like grinds up the food and stuff. But so I guess in the way that I put these in there partially because I was just thinking about, again, the ways in which this can relate to a body and the objects that get trapped in a body, getting trapped inside or outside of your body, and I don't know, trying to confuse all of those things. Oh yeah, and because when I decided to read the Hippocratic Oath when I was working on this project, and then I realized that one of the main tenets of it is I will not cut for stone. And I was like, what does that mean? And so I guess the first form of elective surgery in the world was kidney stone removal, because it was just so painful. People just wanted them out no matter what. And it was so prevalent, obviously, people didn't know what they were doing a bajillion years ago. So it was a dangerous procedure. So it was so, common that they had to put it in the Hippocratic Oath, which is now doctors say that. But yeah, I was thinking about that again, in the whole world of this show, that relating to the stone of madness in the brain, trepanning, and I don't know, the ways in which all of these things can get taken apart and put back together, like Frankenstein. And there's audio on this. I wonder if it will play. Let's see. Oh, the audio is not super important, so we don't need to listen to it. It's okay. Yeah. The audio is just there was a sound component to this installation where it's just a looping sound of found audio of men at cattle auctioneering school saying the Betty Botter tongue twister as a vocal warm-up exercise. And I don't know if this is something that's familiar to anyone, but cattle auctioneers have that or auctioneers in general just have that really interesting way of talking that isn't even, I mean, it's there's an art to that, and it's it sounds just gibberish, but melodic gibberish. And so I don't know, all these grown men saying this nursery rhyme over and over again was very interesting. And then Luke kind of had this weird meditative, mesmerizing chant quality. I felt very ritualistic. So Strange But True was my show at the Queen's Museum in 2021. And so this was an installation that looked at the construction of truth in early photography. And I guess I was sort of inspired by the tropes of noir and other genre fiction. And basically what it does is as a viewer, it situates you as the recipient of this enigmatic letter, which tasks you to explore the research materials on and this enormous topsy-turvy desk and bulletin board of their disappeared correspondence. So it's I mean, and this was probably, to me, in some ways, it felt like a very experimental show because and it's interesting because it's a show that I feel you really have to see or go to in person and walk through. And I worked on the entire thing during COVID lockdown. So maybe it was almost that yearning to go somewhere that spurred that. But it's I guess I kind of almost imagined it as what it would be if it were a point and click video game where okay, here's the entrance. And in addition to that, wall text, that's just the sort of general idea about the show. The upside down text on that piece of paper as part of the mural is a letter that's addressed to you. And then it kind of sets up the conceptual, or I guess the narrative premise for the show. And so the show itself, once you enter inside, is an installation where like the floor is supposed to kind of look like a giant bulletin board with like paper and like other ephemera pinned to it. And then the wall, which like the green wall is supposed to be like like a desktop that has like things you might find on a desktop on it, like a pencil, a magnifying glass, some slides. And so I guess yeah, I guess with this piece, I kind of wanted to this exhibition to point toward the circulation and consumption of like images and how it's like inconclusive and like kind of, you know, like I thought like because that I would maybe come to a conclusion in doing the show, but I didn't. And I think this show kind of reflects that, where like all of like I did a lot of research in around the idea of the ways in which early photography was at the intersection of medicine and entertainment, and then the ways in which that might instrumentalize like and other the bodies of the people who were depicted. But I don't even know if I had a thesis. I think I just really wanted to like read all this material. Like I looked through the Queen's Museum archive on the World's Fairs that took place at Flushing Meadows. You know, I tried to go to, but yeah, at the time, like archives are really hard to visit. But I think that like in terms of like the layout, like it being a bulletin board, to me, like I think it's interesting to think about accumulation as a way information is organized. And like the way one encounters the work is like meandering through it. Like you walk around it, you kind of look at the stuff, and you know, when you put things on a bulletin board, it's like you might put something really important next to something like that you just want to remember, like written on a napkin, and then sometimes it just stays there for a long time. And so like information, things accumulate side by side that are unrelated and out of context. They're modular, and I think that invites forming ideas through proximity, which I think is something I do in my work, I guess. And I think that bulletin board trope in crime dramas and conspiratorial logic is just like, I don't know, I love that. And yeah, I guess I just wanted that sort of to capture that feeling of undefined meandering as being like a pleasurable thing and not didactic. So there was like an audio guide that went with the show, and the audio guide kind of filled you in on the stuff without telling you like what that you had to know these things. But maybe just for time reason, I can just pick up an interesting anecdote. So at the time I was reading a book about, okay, so there are like maybe two of like the most like juicy areas of research that I was doing at the time was on the sort of circulation of that image of death by 1,000 cuts, or of what we know today as death by 1,000 cuts, you know, this person being executed in China, you know, by like, yeah, by being like tortured in this manner. And the philosopher Georges Bataille was really instrumental actually in the circulation, or like what we know today of like our misinterpretation of this image. Like in his book Tears of Eros, there's a collection of correspondence between him and I think his editor or multiple people being like basically him being like, send me like the craziest photos you have, like of the most like abject, sickest stuff. Like, you know, stuff that like, you know, that like impulse, I think is like a big part of the internet today. So I found that to be interesting. Like send me the most cursed images you have, because he wanted to like prove something about love and sex and death and violence. And so, yeah, so I feel like, you know, obviously because like my work is informed a lot by some of the ideas that he has put forth in the world. But you know, like I thought this would be an interesting way to kind of think about, you know, making a work that intersects with thinking about identity for myself without making work about identity in terms of like culture, ethnicity. Yeah, because like he had misinterpreted this, like it's thought of as, you know, this like without going too much into detail, it wasn't, it was like not like a widespread practice. It was like, that was kind of like, not like a one-off thing, but you know, like just, it happened a few times. But like it happened at a time when the camera became a technology that became more widely available to people who were traveling. And so it's kind of being thought of, like to me, I'm like, this is like one of the first travel photographs, just kind of amazing. And so yeah, it kind of just, the camera as a way to index, but like falsely prevent, like cameras have never captured the truth. And I think that was maybe something part of this show, but then that was sort of something that I was thinking about also, with, actually, no, I'm not gonna talk about that because it's gonna be too much information. Oh yeah, I forgot to show the actual slides. So yeah, so here are some of the slides with various research images. Sort of these are kind of meant to look as though it's stuff pinned on the wall. Or you know, the keys to the hotel that you're staying in. Oh yeah, so I found this really interesting like text. It was Vijay writing to someone about yoga and how he was like, oh my God, yoga is like, it gives me like the same feeling that like looking at violent photographs does. It is like transcendent. How did I not know about this? Yoga is awesome. And then, which I thought was hilarious. And then when I was looking through the World's Fair archives, because the Queen's Museum is in Flushing Meadows where two World's Fairs took place in 43 and 63, I think. But at the first World's Fair, there's actually like a freak show area. And one of the features was like, I just saw this photo of this man who's like of South Asian descent. And he's like, the caption is like, he's like a yogi, and he's like, there's a picture of him with just like a bunch of guys. He's like wearing like a leopard print loincloth, and there's just like a bunch of guys standing on him. And they're like, this is so cool. But yeah, I just found a lot of.
In this excerpt from George Bataille's letter to his editor of his book Tears of Eros, published 1 year before his death, Bataille curiously mentions how yoga and an image, that is, a photo of the corpse of a criminal in China, dismembered and flayed by the method known as death by 1,000 cuts. Both of these things led him to ecstatic states. This photograph had a decisive role in my life. I have never stopped being so obsessed by this image of pain, at once ecstatic and
weird. Why is it not?
Goes on to say, in 1938.
Oh, you know, this is very disappointing because I think I didn't save the latest audio file because, so that's the audio file that's in like, if you went to this show, like the audio guide. But I had hired someone to do a Stewie from Family Guy impersonation to read Bataille's letter. And I guess I didn't put that file in this presentation. I'm so bummed out because that was gonna be so cool. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I must have put like the version before, like me reading what I wanted it to say. But that was really cool. I don't know why I did that. It was sort of like, I was like, if someone actually, because I personally don't listen to the whole audio guide ever, but I was like, if someone manages to get through it to this point, they're gonna get a nice little surprise. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like maybe I'm pretty close to maybe like running out of time, so we could just end here and yeah. Thank you.